Good morning, adventurers. My name is Ben, and welcome to a morning show where I sit around, drink some tea, and talk about D&D. All right, uh, I have no D&D news for you, other than we are now exactly 2 weeks away from Fizzbands being announced. Originally, again, it was going to be 1 week, but they've pushed it back by a week. So it is now coming out on October 26th. So make sure you check your pre-order to make sure you still have that coming in the right spot. It's been a problem, I think, with the whole global supply chain problem that's been going on. So there's not really anything anybody can do about it other than just sort of wait a little bit longer to actually get our books in. I guess, again, I'll be doing a full review on that when it comes in, but that is now 2 weeks away instead of one like we had originally wanted it to be. That's how it goes sometimes. And I do not have anything for streams. The twitch.tv/DND channel is dark today, as opposed to when it is not dark normally. Usually they have something going on pretty much every day, but Tuesdays are their dark days. So if you're looking for D&D related content to watch in a live stream kind of capacity, go ahead and check out just the D&D category on Twitch or something like that. If you are, crazy like me, it is slightly after the perfect time, but still close enough to the perfect time to be able to do it, to start rewatching the first campaign of Critical Role once again if you wanted to get it all in before February 4th when The Legend of Vox Machina drops. Just a suggestion, you can also be getting caught up on The Seven, which is out now. All of that is on Dropout. I think the first episode might be on YouTube, but the rest of it is on Dropout. Or if you're looking to get into Dimension 20, all of their stuff for Fantasy High, I believe years 1 and 2 are on YouTube if you are looking for something to start up. That's a lot of plugging for two very big shows that probably don't need plugging, but that's what I got. Also, the Tabletop Tavern underscore has their final episode. I believe it's their final episode this Thursday. So if you're looking to get caught up on their stuff, I would go check out their channel on twitch.tv/ the Tabletop Tavern underscore. So you can catch their final episode live on Thursday. All of that to say, I don't know of any streams that are going on today specifically. Not really the point. For T&D today, I have a chamomile spearmint that I've had before. It's very good. Again, herbal tea, 212, boiling for 3 to 6 minutes, depending on how strong you want it and what kind of tea it is exactly. The mug I have it in is a Nick Miller mug that says, "Gave me cookie, got you cookie." I got it for my fiance for Christmas, I believe. I think that's right. This last year, time is a weird soup. I do not know what's going on most of the time anymore because of COVID. I think it was Christmas this last year, but I think it's a funny mug because I really enjoy this show. Not really the point. Good tea. Before I dive into the actual subject for today, I want to give a general shout out. I don't really know what to call it. My friends that had been in over the weekend are traveling back home today, and their flight got canceled, which means they had to rent a car late at night and drive in two legs. They are making their second leg of the drive right now. So send some good vibes their way if you have the bandwidth to do so, please and thank you. Guys, if you are watching this, love you. Thanks so much for visiting. Get home safe. Um, anyway, getting into what we are actually talking about today, I want to talk a little bit about running a dragon in combat and how you can actually make your dragons the terrifying things they are supposed to be, as opposed to just a big old sack of hit points that just sort of beats down on stuff and breathes on stuff. Because unfortunately, that's how we sort of like recede. Recede? I don't know if that's the right word. That's how we end up. That's how we default. There we go. To running monsters as a whole. Dragons being no exception to that. But dragons are. There's. I've said it many times on this show. I will say it many more times. There is a reason they are half of the name of the game, ultimately, right? So let's talk a little bit about good tactics, good ways to run dragons in combat. Now there is I think it's a blog. It's definitely a book. I'm pretty sure it started off as a blog called The Monsters Know What They're Doing, which is a phenomenal resource for all of your monster running needs. They have a whole extensive section on dragons, and I definitely recommend checking that out. I cover at least similar points to a lot of the stuff they talk about on there in here, but there's this in text, and I'm just going to be spraying whatever words come out of my mouth. Spraying is a weird verb there, but I'm going to stick with it, I guess. So first off, the thing that a lot of people forget about dragons is that they are very smart, with the exception of white dragons. I am almost positive of this. I I say I'm almost positive. I scrolled through all the stat blocks, and unless I missed something, white dragons are the only ones that have an intelligence at or below 10 through all of their forms. An adult, or sorry, an ancient, there we go, white dragon has an intelligence of 10. It is the lowest stat. It is the lowest intelligence stat of any ancient dragon by a significant amount, and it is the lowest intelligence. It is tied for the lowest intelligence stat of any other dragon, other than the other ones in its line. If you think back to the dragons video that I did way at the beginning of this channel, I talked about how the white dragons are the most animalistic of them. But that is to say that these dragons should be smart, like at least normally intelligent, right? The average human intelligence in D&D stat is roughly 10. So you should be treating your dragons as if they are geniuses, or at least baseline human smart, right? They're not these just like raw anger things when you get up to the ancients especially, but they're not just these like animal beings that just want to murder everything. Like, maybe they do want to murder everything, but that is not their sole purpose, right? They should be smart. That giving them an actual intelligence means that they should be able to do things like read situations, come up with tactics, be able to determine different armor types that might be better or worse against what they're working with, and they should be able to like take in and read character abilities as they are used. That doesn't mean the dragon should have meta knowledge. Like, they shouldn't target the cleric outright from the get-go because they know that they're going to be the healer unless they've had an interaction with them before. But when they start seeing that particular character be the one that is healing up party members, they should take note of that. Like, that's just how that goes, right? So they should be able to look at the fighter in their plate armor as opposed to the druid in their maybe leather armor, and be able to go, I'm going to have an easier time of actually breaking through the armor of that guy over there in the leather as opposed to that guy over there in the metal suit. So they should be able to determine differences in armor types like that. And the first one in that list of 3 that I'm apparently going backwards on is tactics. They should be able to actually use some logical tactics in their fighting abilities, which I will go through in a second here, obviously. Now, the thing to remember about dragons is likely your party is going to be fighting chromatic dragons. There's no reason they can't fight metallics, but chromatics are the, quote-unquote evil ones, and D&D parties largely are the ones that are trying to stop evil things from happening in the world. So you're probably going to be fighting chromatic dragons. All dragons across the board, but especially chromatic dragons, are vain, and that should be something that carries through and plays in any sort of interaction you have with a dragon. So they are going to be there to prove themselves in this fight, but they will have a certain amount of self-preservation because they are so neurotic and focused on themselves, right? So these dragons should not be pulling any punches for any reason unless they have logicked it out in their own head, or they are trying to preserve themselves. So dragons, again, very intelligent creatures, will plan and plot throughout their preparation, particularly if they know something is coming. If they get word somehow a week in advance that they are having an adventuring party come through who will be trying to take them out in some capacity, they will spend their time plotting and planning to take out that adventuring party. They will probably send scouts, if they have minions, out to do some research, to do some recon, to figure out what the deal with this party is. This is where the slightly meta knowledge might come in handy, where if one of their scouts comes back and is like, okay, this individual it seems to be the party healer. They are well connected to this NPC individual, maybe, and then the dragon has a reason to go attempt to interact with or threaten or something like that particular NPC individual. They are going to be looking for some way to leverage their intelligence in the fight before the fight has begun, and that is an important thing to actually remember. Um, the If they don't know that anybody is coming and they just the adventuring party just sort of shows up and knocks on their door, well, then they're gonna have to have stuff set out already. If you are that vain and neurotic and just like uptight about everything, you're gonna have some kind of like pre-planned kind of thing set up, right? You're gonna have booby traps. You're gonna have really any sort of preparation to make it so that you are not just a sitting duck in your own home. Like, we have locks on our front doors for a reason. It's so people don't break in. Well, dragons probably don't have locks, but they might have like boulder traps, or they might have, if they are a spellcasting dragon, which there are variants to give dragons spellcasting, they might have glyphs that will go off, or they have hired people to put glyphs down. They know their lair inside and out, and that should be a major asset to them if a party is showing up on their doorstep. Um, if you end up in open combat with a dragon on a totally level playing field with them not having any of their stuff, you are either crazy lucky, it is super super accidental and like quite literally on a random encounter table, or you have just outsmarted a very smart being, which is good for you. Um, so in terms of actual like in battle strategies for these dragons, they will, if they have their minions with them, the minions will be there and targeting the party in whatever way best supports the dragon. So if they are noticing that there are casters with concentration spells up that are affecting the dragon in some way, you better believe the minions are going to be going after that individual. Largely those with like crossbows or something to be able to shoot into the back lines. Um, the If there is a person that is dealing a lot of damage to that dragon, the minions might mob that individual to try and get them to either distracted or thrown off or take them down so that the dragon can effectively reorient itself and get back to the rest of the party. Uh, Dragons should largely, while they want to prove themselves and prove their strength, they should probably stay out of range for a lot of things for the most part. They should be the bane of melee characters, honestly, because while yes, it might provide for the story for the dragon to go toe to toe with a bruiser in the party. Dragons are ultimately monsters, and they, on some level, should understand that and know that they will sustain a lot of damage going toe to toe with somebody who knows what they're doing with a melee weapon. So they should probably hang back, stay up in the air, especially where they have a fly speed double their walking speed, which is phenomenal across the board. Um, and try and stay out of range, sort of making like these flyby attacks, these pass attacks. They specifically don't have flyby as an ability. It's just the only way I can think to describe that type of attack. While they are at range, they can use their breath weapon, which really means that they don't need to get down into range for a lot of things most of the time. That's part of the reason that really, when characters end up fighting a dragon, there should be some way for almost every single one of them to fly or attack at long, long range for in some capacity, right? My home game, they like the ranger will conjure animals and conjure 8 giant owls so that every member of the party can get on an owl and go flying. That said, they kind of get swept in a breath attack, but the dragon isn't going to burn its breath weapon on a single individual if the party has like swarmed up and around it and it can't orient itself in a way that will encompass more than one of them. It's just going to be easier for them to make one of their multi-attacks, like a bite, claw, tail, etc., to just sort of like take out 4 different targets in that capacity. And at that point, you can start using like mount rules and stuff like that to try and I use an adapted version of mount rules that allow sort of the players to try and take some of the damage for their mount, but not necessarily all of it. It's a little confusing. I might go over it at some point, but it allows, if they strategize and place themselves well, it allows them to sort of circumvent that breath weapon possibility if they can fly and get themselves into the right kind of orientation. Um, if at all possible, a dragon will try to isolate different characters because a 6-on-1 with an ancient dragon is maybe a pretty fair fight for like a group of level 15s or so. A Not 15s. I think it might actually be like 12 if it's 6 of them. If it's 4 of them, it should be like 15, 16, 17, somewhere in there. Um, but if it is a one-on-one fight, the dragon will have the upper hand, and they know that going into it, right? Like again, not stupid creatures. They should know that the smaller the number of enemies they're fighting at one time, the much better chance they are going to have. And so they should try to isolate characters if at all possible. And if they can get a character isolated, they will not let up until that character is dead. Which means that if they get a character isolated, the rest of the party is going to have to pick up some slack and figure out how to get that character not so isolated anymore. Um, in addition to the attempting to isolate characters and the staying out of range thing, they will not, or they should not really, let any time for recuperation happen, right? Yes, they don't want to get all up in your business necessarily if it's going to be a 6-on-1 fight, but they do not want you to have the ability to give yourself a bunch of buffs in the middle of combat or heal up a lot in the middle of combat, because then that will put them at a disadvantage. So they should try and stay on you if they're intending to continue the fight. Now, in terms of continuing the fight, uh, right at about like 60% health for a independent dragon, I like to have them start to reconsider a little bit, start to change up their tactics, because they are clearly not doing quite as well in this fight as they seem to think ahead of time. At 35% of their health ish, they will take off. They should take off. I think in the Monsters Know What They're Doing, they say it's 40%, but I drop it a little bit lower than that because just under half feels a little bit too much to me, but a little bit past that feels about right. They should have plenty of health to get away with if they have it, or they should be able to feel comfortable enough taking a couple of hits on their way out. It is important to remember that dodge and disengage are viable actions for dragons. If they cannot think of a tactically advantageous thing to do, particularly the older ones, they can take the dodge and disengage actions to avoid attacks of opportunity and to avoid and to give disadvantage on attacks against them, because they don't want to be hit. And the older ones, particularly the adults and ancients, and by particularly I mean exclusively the adults and ancients, get layer actions, they get legendary actions, and they get legendary resistances. Stack all of that onto a round where they take the dodge action, they are going to give themselves quite a bit of action economy still, while giving everybody in the party disadvantage on stuff against them. And that is not a bad tactical move a lot of the time. Plus, it gives them the opportunity to sort of like reorient themselves and put themselves in a position where they will maybe be able to hit everybody with a breath weapon, which is really sort of obviously their hammer that they will just bring down at that point. And then I have a lot to say on this, but the last thing I really want to hit and drive home is that if you have a dragon that is retreating, it is important for them to, one, be retreating to either a smaller secondary layer that they might have, or to their main layer if you have lured them out in some capacity. Because there should be a place for a dragon to go that will more than likely be safe for them, at least in their minds, where they have a stock of healing items or a stock of people who will be able to heal them. Because they will not like to be vulnerable for very long. They want to be able to get out, re-heal themselves, and be ready in case anything comes careening after them. This goes for like party to dragon conflict and like dragon to dragon conflict or dragon to other monster conflict. They do not want to be chased down and murdered because they don't want to be murdered. straight up. And to be chased down and murdered would be a cowardly way to go. And again, these guys are pretty dang vain. Um, at least the chromatics are very vain. The other ones, maybe not quite as much, but still kind of full of themselves. They're like these immortalish beings who are like, oh, I can't be bothered with whatever. Not really the point. Um, but each dragon is different, and each dragon, especially when you get them to be in the older stages, should have their own personality. Dragons are a phenomenal place for roleplay within combat to happen. I think that if you are skipping roleplay in combat with a dragon, there had better be a pretty good reason for there not to be that much roleplay revolving around the dragon. Good example, I ran a combat session that actually had quite a bit of roleplay in it, but the focus was not on the dragon in the combat, it was on the person that was riding the dragon and controlling the dragon. So the dragon didn't do as much in terms of like the speaking and everything like that, but it stayed, though it did change its tactic and become more reserved when it hit a certain amount of hit points, and eventually try and fly off as soon as the guy that was controlling it went down. Um, but that dragon did not say, it said a couple of things throughout the combat, but it did not say that much because so much of the spotlight was put onto the guy that was riding the dragon and controlling the dragon. Um, so make sure you have a good reason for not engaging in a lot of dragon roleplay if you are going to run a dragon encounter. Otherwise, you should really run some roleplay for the dragons. If you haven't watched Campaign 1 of Critical Role, there is a whole section in there centered around dragons, and Matt does a phenomenal job, obviously, of running those dragons. So I definitely recommend, once again, watching Critical Role if you haven't yet. But again, I know it's not for everybody, but that's just for me. But that is everything that I have to talk to you guys about today. Thank you so much for making me a part of your morning routine. I really do appreciate it. And thank you so much to my patrons. You guys are the ones who are making this show possible more than anything else. So thank you very, very much. If you are able to and would like to support the show, the link to my Patreon is in the description of this video. I am trying to push out this content every single weekday so that you can make it part of your workday routine. But as I said, that is everything I have for you guys. And until next time, keep on rolling.